I'm good.
It's heading live now.
Uh-oh, what happened there? That's not fun. Okay.
Hello, 21st century educators. Welcome to another Facebook Live. Today, we will be talking about how to survive Rock-tober and the rest of the school year. And of course, we have Anika Costa with us. We will be starting promptly at 6 p.m. So remember to tell your friends, tell your educator friends, social workers, guidance counselors to jump on. And as usual, we would love to know where you are viewing us from. So please use the Facebook chat and tell us where you are from. And we will be starting promptly at 6. So in the meantime, Anika, do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone on Facebook. I'm so happy to be here and share some knowledge with you tonight. I think we've got an exciting talk. Get your fingers ready to drop some things in the chat. Leanne is going to be, she's going to be my eyes and she's going to help me navigate the chat. So please, please, please make it interactive. And she'll let me know what's going on in the chat.
Correct. All right. So we still have a couple of minutes, but I do want you to make sure to have your, take notes. Of course, the Facebook Live remains up afterwards, so you can look at it again. And for those of you who may be viewing later, we still want to say hello. So even when you jump on after the live, please let us know where you're viewing us from. All right. And we really want you to ask questions, put your comments in the chat. I will be sharing those with Anika, as well as she will also have a Q&A at the end of the session. And as usual, 21st century educators, we like to start things on time. So we will have 2 minutes to start time. So make sure to tell all your colleagues to jump on, and let's get ready to have a very interactive session. So we'll see you in 2 minutes time. And in the meantime, start chatting with us so we know where you are viewing us from. And I'll be disappearing very shortly, but I will be right in the background. So Anika, you are going to take over. So I'm going to leave you very shortly because we have 1 minute to start time, and you can go right ahead and start on time. All right.
All right. Well, my watch says 5:59. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And as we ramp up here, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I am Anika Costa. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I am a former educator certified teacher. And as I mentioned, I am excited to share some knowledge here with you tonight. And some of you are probably wondering, what's Rock-tober? Maybe some of you have heard of it. This is a term that's used, that's used to describe the month of the school year when educators see a significant increase or uptick in student misbehavior, referrals and suspensions. And I have to give a little shout out to a very clever educator who came up with a different version of this of this term Rock-tober, which is probably my favorite. And it's the month of the year when students, or the school year, when students seem to lose their minds, forget routines, expectations, and the teachers are just over it. Okay. So that's Rocktober, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to be talking about how to survive the rest of the school year and what are some quick responses to managing your classroom and reducing misbehavior in your classroom. So, before we dig into all of that, what I'd like to talk about and just think about for a moment are some precipitating factors. So, students, as we know before the pandemic, students have had things happen in their life that educators might not necessarily see. Okay, so non academic factors play a large role in student success. And, what we see is the problem behavior. Sometimes we need to dig a little deeper. And that, underneath the surface, there are all of these underlying struggles that, again, if we're not engaged with our students or asking good questions, problematic behavior comes out at school and is a stress reaction to trauma. And we may not be aware of all of these things happening with our students. And then you throw COVID on top of it. Okay, so we've already pre-pandemic had these issues and kids, showing up to school with, traumas, and now we throw COVID-19 in the mix. So some sobering data. Now, this one hit home, and I had to just kind of pause here because I have a third grader and I have a sixth grader. And it just really like put things into perspective. The last normal school year we had, right? My students. So if I'm talking about my third grader, so if you look on the left-hand side, third grade. So if your students in third grade, the last normal school year they experienced was kindergarten. Think in. That was the last year they were, most of the students, in-person school. Okay. So it's a little sobering of, what our students are dealing with as they re-enter, most students re-entering back into in-person school. And with the challenges of virtual school and scrambling and trying to figure it all out. Okay. So the US Department of Education put out a report on the impact of COVID-19 on America's students. And this report offered a series of, snapshots from mid-March 2020 when the world shut down and schools had to shift and pivot and abruptly move to remote learning. And this report, these snapshots are following as a developing story to mid 2021. And these observations are discussing how our students or how the pandemic has impacted our students. So in core subjects like math and reading, there are some worrisome signs. And in some grades, students may be falling even further behind on pre-academic expectations. What I want you to consider here is that academic growth is behavior. So, what behaviors do students need to engage in to learn? And I'll pause here for a minute. You drop some responses in the chat. We have a slight pause, I know. And also, what I want you to think about is not only what behaviors do students need to engage in to learn, but what behaviors do students need to do to demonstrate their learning? And remember, learning is all about behavior. And we're looking at, so what do students need to do to demonstrate their behavior? They need to stay on task and complete their work. Those are behaviors that in the classroom they need to follow the rules, follow instructions the first time. And learning is all about behavior, and our behavior and the behavior of the students is what we need to consider. So students just didn't lose academic learning during the pandemic. Some lost family members. Others had caregivers who lost their jobs and sources of income. And almost all of our students have experienced some social isolation. And nearly all the students have experienced some challenges to their mental health and well-being during the pandemic. Many have lost services that they would have otherwise received in school. So supports that they may have, students students who are receiving special services or in special education programs. These supports were lost because they didn't have access to in-person school, and these school-based services were did not necessarily translate easily into a virtual setting. And so in 2020, a survey of over 16,000 parents across every state in America looked at the mental health and social emotional health of children. And parents reported that they were concerned about their child's mental health and wellness. And 35% of those parents reported that they were extremely concerned about their child's mental health, mental and social emotional health. And so, folks, mental health is really behavioral health. And what people don't understand is that your thoughts and feelings are all behavior. And what we call covert behavior is, only you can see what you are thinking and feeling. And as we look at all the effects of the pandemic and how our schools, our students, our teachers, our administrators, our districts have been impacted, we've got a lot of unfinished learning. Remember that visual a few slides ago when we had a real, normal school. And also working through now the mental health issues with COVID layered on top and that social reintegration back into an in-person school setting. But it's not just students that we're concerned about. Okay, so there was a study done, and this was a pre-pandemic study. 7% of teachers surveyed were classified as low stress, high coping, and low burnout. So 7% say, yeah, I'm good. This means that 93% of teachers are stressed. Okay. And if this study were done now, and in 2018, I'm wondering what that data would look like now. Okay. So it appears that many teachers, like our students, do not have the necessary coping skills or they're experiencing mental health challenges. And coping, and I'll tee this up and drop a little Easter egg here, is behavior. And equipping our educators with coping mechanisms is critical if we want them to bring out the best in our children, and they need it. And if a major goal of education is to increase student achievement, we need to address the growing social emotional needs of both students and educators. And so in the 1990s, 1 in 100 teachers suffered from long-lasting mental health issues. Okay, and that was in 1 in 100. What do you think that number is now? And this is in 2020. You can imagine that it's more, right? So got a little ahead of myself there. So in a recent study, it found that 1 in 20, so 1 in 20 teachers suffered from long-lasting mental health issues. And what's more concerning is that um, highly stressed teachers have more instances of disruptive behaviors and lower levels of prosocial behaviors in their classrooms. Okay, so these patterns of teacher stress are directly related to student success in school, both academically and behaviorally. So we've got teacher turnover. And most teachers are leaving the field. And as they leave the field, they're reporting the following reasons why: perceived lack of support from administrators, feeling underprepared to meet the rigors or demands of the classroom, and issues directly related to student misbehavior. So when we're talking about lack of support from administrators, we're talking about administrators' behavior. Okay, so what do the administrators need to do more, less, or differently to better support teachers in a way that brings out the best in them? And similarly, what can teachers do more, less, or differently to bring out the best in their students? Again, we're talking about behavior. We're going to be talking all about behavior. And as we dig in, all of these behaviors, we should understand, are linked. And bringing out the best in students requires bringing out the best in teachers, and bringing out the best in teachers requires bringing out the best in school leaders, and all the way up the chain. So it's a serious problem. And a big part of that has to do with understanding and applying behavioral principles, equipping teachers and school leaders with simple tools for preventing and managing behavior can have a major impact on teacher retention. So, behavior is, and this is the textbook definition. I'm going to talk a little bit about behavior, what it is. And you may be surprised to know that human behavior is everything that people do, how they move, what they say, what they think, what they feel. Okay, so behavior is everything that we do. All right, so now I'll ask you, why do you think problem behaviors occur? And Leanne, I don't know if we have anybody in the chat.
Yes, we do, Anita. Just
All right.
reminded. Yeah, we had some answers that would have come before to the question that you
Okay.
would have asked. So persons would have said before that it's important listening, taking notes, critical thinking, asking questions, class participation, group work, working together, independent working. And we're just going to give them a couple minutes because there is a delay from Zoom to Facebook.
That's right.
So
I have to remember that.
that's
I
okay.
get so excited.
So we're just going to wait until a couple of people type in why do problem behaviors occur. Someone said learning history.
Ooh, I like that. Yes.
Someone also mentioned that mental health issues are mounting.
Okay. Yes. And we're thinking about the why here.
To escape things they don't want.
Yes. And that's right. So escaping things that they don't want or don't want to do.
Attention from
Attention.
students. Intermittent reinforcement from various individuals.
That's right. That
Lack of
reinforcement, that
support.
peer attention is great. What was the last one?
Lack of support.
Lack of support. Yes. Yes.
Frustration.
Frustration.
Lots of answers coming in.
That's right. So, yes, all of those great answers. And behavior happens really for two reasons. So, it's to get something and to get away from something. And I want you to think about it's not just access to tangibles or like getting access to something, but we have to think about rules about behavior, and these rules that, someone said learning history, right? So the rules we learn about a particular behavior, and these rules are, if something that you value or you desire, you're going to move towards that, right? So you're going to engage in behavior that's going to move you toward the things that you value or that you desire, right? So you follow your values. Okay, so we're educators, maybe we have some behavior practitioners here, and helping people for us is a reinforcer, right? That's why we're in the fields that we're in. And so you teach people to help people, and you're getting something out of it. So it's not necessarily like a tangible thing, like a Skittle or a piece of chocolate, right? It's something else, right? You're following your values. You're in this business because you want to help people. And so that's why you stay in this business, right? It feels good. So again, if something is valued or desired, you or the student, you're more likely to engage in a particular behavior again. Okay, so we say then this behavior is maintained. Again, this is principles of human behavior. This is how behavior works. Okay, all right, great answers. So I will ask you, why do you come to work? I'll just pause here for a few seconds.
Anika, this seems to be a tough one, a tough question.
Oh, nobody wants to say, all right, I put money up there.
But
Like,
we
okay.
have some answers to help others to get paid,
Okay. Yes, get paid. Yes, to help others, right? What else? Anything
to
else?
contribute positively to society.
Yes, yes. All of those things, right? Those are all things we value. And, it's okay to say that, we want to get paid for the work that we do. That's okay, right? And with that money, we can, provide for our families and, get our needs and wants met. So it's okay to say, we want to come to work so we get paid, right?
We
So,
have some other answers because
okay.
of how persons feel and because of how persons are treated, and of course, salary. Yes.
Yes, 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 and yes. Absolutely. So you want to keep in mind that, there are all of these reasons, all these things that you value and what keeps your working behavior or going to work behavior maintained, right? So you have these things these behaviors. And as adults, you operate on the same behavior principles as your students. And so I'm going to pose another question to you. Why do you do the speed limit? Kind of a random question, right? Why do you do the speed limit? Or do you? Let's assume here that you do.
So, Anika, while people consider why we keep to the speed limit, we just had some
Mhm.
additional answers for the previous questions.
Okay.
Or somebody's asking, what is the question? So if you could repeat the question.
Oh, why do we do the speed limit?
And somebody answered to say, avoid getting a ticket.
Oh, yes. That's a big one. To avoid getting a ticket. Any other reasons?
Yeah, same thing. Safety,
Okay.
traffic tickets.
Safety. Yes.
It's the law.
It's the law. Oh, there's rule governed behavior, right? It's the law. It's the thing that we do, right? The thing that we do to keep us safe. So we're teeing that up. Okay, so we avoid tickets. We do the speed limit to avoid tickets because it helps keep us safe. Um, it's the law. Now I'm going to ask another question. Why do students, or why do you think students come to school?
Meet their friends,
Meet their friends. Okay. The friends are of value potentially for the students and that they value friends. What else?
Somebody said because parents send them.
Right? The parents tell you guys to go to school. Like, you don't have a choice.
Some because they are sent for social interaction as an escape from home,
Okay. Social
um,
interaction.
uh, to build relationships, and a lot of because parents make them.
Parents make them, right? Do you think students like want to come to school for any other reason?
One person said, hopefully to learn.
Yes. That was the answer I was hoping someone would say, right? Because we the ones that do come to school to learn, those are the students that are going to go above and beyond, right? So learning is reinforcing to them. They get something out of it, right? They're going to seek out information and they're going to engage in all of those behaviors that are going to get them in contact with reinforcement, um, that align with their values or move them toward their values, and they value learning, right? So, what is going to increase the likelihood? So, you've got the students. So, let's just say, for example, you have the students that are coming to school because they want to learn. What is going to increase the likelihood that they want to continue to learn?
And while teachers ponder on that question,
Mhm.
well, we actually have an answer: a comfortable, safe environment.
Comfortable, safe environment. I love it. Yes. Yes, a comfortable and safe environment. And what would make up that comfortable and safe environment?
Another person says that they feel comfortable. So this is in
Mhm.
response to the question before.
Mhm.
Safety, interesting lessons, tying in what
Mhm.
they do now to future goals.
Yes. Interesting lessons, safety, right? Anything else?
Fun and engaging learning environment.
Yes, yes, right? So that's going to increase the likelihood that they want to learn, right? That they're going to want to keep coming back to school because school is fun, it's engaging. Okay. So I'm going to pause right there. So just hold that there for a second. And I'm going to go back to the speed limit example. And some of you said that you do the speed limit to avoid getting a ticket. Okay. And some of you just mentioned that students come to school because they have to. So, for those students who are coming to school because they have to, they're going to do just enough to get by, to avoid an aversive consequence. And I think you've answered this question, but I'm going to throw it out there. Do you think students learn more when they want to learn versus if they have to learn?
Anika, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Sure. So, and I think we touched on this and we may have answered. Do you think students learn more when they want to learn versus if they have to learn?
Want to learn.
That's right. That's right. And many of you have already dropped in the chat those things to create an environment where students want to learn. So you mentioned engagement, you mentioned a reinforcing environment, you mentioned lessons being fun and exciting. Okay. They feel like students want to come to school and they want to learn when they feel like the adults at the school care. Okay. They want a teacher who is responsive and interested. And big one, students want a safe and orderly environment. And this means classroom management. So I'm going to ask you, what might be some common classroom situations that cause misbehavior?
So, Anika, while teachers are pondering this question, just an
Mhm.
interesting comment from Candice. They learn more when they want to learn the things they want to, rather than the things they're forced to.
Oh, okay. So that's an interesting point because I think there's some truth to that. The things that they want to as opposed to what they have to. And so I think as part of making our lessons engaging and fun and exciting for our students, we have to know what their interests are, right? And we can embed some of their interests, maybe in the way we teach, the materials, how we teach it, what modality. Maybe it's, engaging in or using or infusing technology into our lessons. And so creating a space for students where they're like, ooh, this is fun. And it could be too introducing them to things that they may not know is interesting or fun. So that's where you're creative. That's where the art of teaching comes into play. That was a good point.
So, a couple of responses to what might be some common classroom situations that cause misbehavior:
Mhm.
uninteresting content and activities,
Mhm.
lack of structure, chaotic
Yes.
class,
Mhm.
teachers' lack of preparedness,
Oh, that's a
uh,
big one.
disinterested teacher, lack of planning, poorly paced
Mhm.
lessons, lack of consistent classroom management, lesson lacks planning or structure.
That's right. All of those things. Every single one of y'all hit every single one. Okay. Yes, all of these things. Also, there's learning history, right? And there's also personal history, which we talked about too. So, all of the things you said, yes, yes, and yes. There's some reasons why common or misbehavior occurs in the classroom. I'd like you to remember, though, behavior is communication. So, when students are engaging in these behaviors, problem behavior, okay, and then think about what we said about what makes a student want to come to school. Okay. The student's behavior is telling you something. You want to think about it like an assessment, right? What is the student's behavior telling you? Do you have frequent flyers? Does the problem behavior persist? Okay. Does what is the individual or what is the student getting out of this behavior? Okay. And here we're talking about the why and what we behavior practitioners call a function of behavior. Okay. And once you understand the why behavior is happening, it's then it gives you a way to appropriately respond or react to those behaviors, to that student's behavior. And so, how you look for or how you figure out the function of behavior, you have to look for patterns of behavior. So, it's important to think about what the behavior is telling you. What are you observing that student's behavior? And so, why does this behavior occur and how can you get the behavior that you want more of? Well, it involves doing something more or less or differently. Okay. And knowing the why or the function of the behavior will help you decide what strategy, how to respond, and how to either reinforce or correct behavior. Okay. Now, I know whew, we can struggle with this, right? Behavior can feel personal, right? Like the student is doing or engaging in behavior to get under your skin, right? It can feel like it's directed to you. It's very personal. Sometimes it hits, a little bit differently, some days more than others. And what I again want you to think about here is that you need to look at this as data. This is a formative assessment. Again, when it feels personal, when this behavior feels like it's directed to you, what does this do to your behavior? Okay, so I'm going to let you drop that in the chat because it's happened to all of us. Okay, it can feel like, why are they saying, why are they doing, why are they, right? So, what does this do to your behavior in that moment when it feels personal?
Someone said, you feel incompetent.
Mm, hmm. You feel incompetent, and how does that come out? You think that, you feel that, but how does that come out? Do you feel incompetent and then you just sit and stay quiet?
Someone said, makes me angry. I might yell. I feel sick to my
Yes.
stomach.
Mhm. Right, so there's a visceral response, right? Get that knot in your stomach, okay? And it might come out your overt behavior, right? You
Someone
might
said,
yell.
makes you more reactive versus being proactive to prevent
Mhm.
problem behavior.
Yeah, it's easy to be reactive in that moment, right? Sometimes, certain behaviors we engage in when we're feeling like this behavior feels when it's we feel like it's personal and we want the behavior to stop so we can get on with what we're doing, right? And so we may engage in things like reprimand or maybe sending the student out of the room, right? Calling for assistance. And so the behavior stops, right? We can remove the aversiveness, the problem behavior from the environment, and we can get on with what we want and need to do, which is teach. Okay. But I ask you to remember that problem behaviors are functional. They serve a purpose and they are learned just like any other behavior. The behavior that students are engaging in that's problematic gets results, right? It gets results. And again, it's important to understand the why, the function. Why is the student engaging in this behavior? What are they trying to get access to, get away from? Okay. The problem behavior works for the student. And unfortunately, sometimes what happens is that you, as the teacher, engaging in certain behaviors may have inadvertently reinforced problem behavior. Okay, so therefore you would have essentially taught the student to misbehave based on your response and reaction to behavior. So we need to do something differently, right? So if it feels personal, we might need to change. Okay. We need to look at not only our verbal behavior, our vocal verbal behavior, what we say, our tone of voice, how we say it, but also how else are we communicating? Our non-vocal verbal behavior, and that is our body language, our face. I'm very expressive with my face. So sometimes I have to rein it in, right? Because it shows on my face. My thoughts and my feelings come right out in my face, the gestures that we use. And it's really hard to engage in the right behavior when you feel emotional, right? So, all of those things that you just dropped in the chat, you're talking about the things that you feel, those visceral responses, the tightening of the stomach, right? Your face feels hot, you feel incompetent, and all of those feelings makes it really easy to just want to get rid of that behavior, that aversiveness in the moment. Okay. So while it's hard to engage in the right behavior when you're feeling this way, it makes it easier to engage in different or appropriate behaviors when they've been identified in a system. Okay. So if I tell you, don't be angry, or one of my hot buttons, you should just calm down. Now, if somebody just tells me to calm down, that's not going to work. Okay. I need to know, or I need to remember, and maybe in that moment, I need to pause and I think about what behaviors that I need to engage in when I'm angry to produce the desired outcomes that I want. Okay. And how do we find out what those behaviors are? Well, it's research. It's everything I'm talking about, and it's rooted in research. Okay. It's rooted in the science. So we're going to dig into systems. And according to systems expert Danella Meadows, a system is an interconnected set of elements that is coherently organized in a way that achieves something. A system must consist of three things: elements, interconnections, and a function or purpose. Okay, so let's break that down. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. All right. Got this driving example tonight. So, what would it be like if there were no systems or rules for driving? Okay, so in other words, there were no stoplights, stop signs, or any signs at all. There were no lines in the road to let you know whether you could pass or not. There were no directions or GPS or, you know, nothing beyond how to operate a car. So there's no system of what to do, who goes when. How would you know when to pass? How would you know what speed limit to go? So none of these things exist. What do you think will happen?
Yes.
Chaos, utter and complete chaos. And what else?
Someone said a recipe for disaster.
100%. Yes, yes, and yes. What else is jeopardized here? Remember, you don't know when to turn, you don't know when to stop, you don't know when to go. There's no system, no rules, no cops, no traffic cops, no type of landmarks,
Lots
street
of
signs,
accidents.
lots of accidents, right? Accidents lead to people getting what?
No standards.
That's right, no
Fear,
standards.
fear and confusion. Personal life will be affected.
Yes.
Pandemonium.
100%. Yes, yes, and yes. And so, again, if we don't have systems, right? Systems are made to make sense of all of this chaos, right? Rules are made to make sense of this chaos. They are meant to help guide people. Otherwise, people are just going to do whatever they think they should do, right? I mean, you're going to go if you don't have anyone telling you, or there's no mechanism telling you or a sign to tell you to stop. We all know that red means stop and green means go, and yellow means slow down. In my case, it's probably more of speed up and get through the light. But right, these are all these rules that we have, right? We learn these rules through driving. We learn through repetition, all the driving that we do. And once we, obtain a license and we're able to do that, we get a lot of practice with that. And we were taught how to drive, but also taught how to follow the rules, right? And most of us do that most of the time, right? This rule governed behavior. And we don't have to think about the rules of driving, right? We're kind of on automatic because we've had so much practice with it. We know the systems. And if we weren't actually driving, we were seeing all the signs. If we weren't able to drive because we weren't of age, we're still experiencing it. And we know what the rules of the road are. You go the speed limit. If a cop, or if there's a police officer, traffic, officer, hiding in those speed traps, to slow down. These are rules that you're not necessarily taught, but it's rule governed behavior. We kind of know this is the way things happen. Okay. And so we don't really think about it. Okay. And so we have all of these prompts in the environment that tell us, what to do, like the cop, or just remind us, right? Like the speed trap reminds us that there's a potential for a ticket here if you don't slow down, right? So there's a punishment coming, and there's also, reinforcement. You're like, well, what's reinforcing about, driving? Well, in this case, and adhering to the rules, and and having that system, the reinforcement is that you get to point A and to point B safely, right? You you have uh you have those rules in place that guide and govern our behavior, and you have those prompts when you need them. So much like those little bumps on the side of the highway, where it makes this loud like "brrr" sound if you go over too far in the median, or to the ditch. It alerts you that the prompt to, all right, you got to get back on track, stay in your lane. Okay, all of those things serve as prompts. They're part of the system, or the rules for driving. And very much like in the classroom, okay, good systems and behavior change. So a good system of classroom management, your elements of your classroom management plan. Okay, this is your system, your structure, your environment, your classroom environment for managing your classroom and behavior. Okay, so you think about, again, you're not thinking about how you move through the system of driving and the roads, right? It's kind of an automatic. Well, think about how that would feel and be, and how nice it would be if your classroom operated that way, right? So if you had a good system of classroom management with all the appropriate elements, and it kind of, it works. It works because you, as the teacher in the classroom, knew exactly what was in that plan. You constructed it. You structured an environment for success. You understood that you needed to engage in certain behaviors so that the students knew what to do. Because otherwise, if they don't, you're going to have what? Chaos, right? They're going to do whatever they think they need to do. And it's probably not going to be the outcome that you want, right? It's not going to be the behaviors that you want. And thinking about how you observe this plan and make changes to it as necessary, and interactions with students, and how you correct um, misbehavior or behavioral problems as they arise. Okay, so the teacher in this case is the prompt for moving through and staying on track with the behavior management plan. And as I mentioned, or classroom management plan, and as I mentioned, most of the kids, if you have most of the students, if you have a structured, robust classroom management plan and it's taught and students know the expectations, they're going to follow it. And then you have those students that, need some prompting, right? Just like those guardrails, just like those bumps in the road that alert you when you're going too far to the right or to the left and you're not staying in your lane. And then you have those students, much like some people who shouldn't be driving, you have students who may need some additional supports. Okay. But you have to plan for this. This is all part of your classroom management plan. So this is your structure for success, right? Oh, a little too far. So I want you to think about, what are some of those things that you need to structure, some of those systems, those elements that you need to put in place in your classroom. What are some things you need to think about in the classroom to structure for success?
Rules and routines.
Okay, rules and routines, yes. What else?
Ways to get students engaged.
Mhm.
Consequences for both good and bad behavior.
Yes.
How to address both positive and problem behaviors, routines, actions, and consequences.
That's
Rewards for positive engagement. Procedures and routines. Anika, you're muted.
I'm just talking away. All right. So yes, yes, and yes, all of those responses. So all of those routines and procedures, the physical environment of the classroom, what is it going to look like? What do you need to arrange? How you need to arrange the environment, your schedules, all of these things affect your success, your structure for success. Okay. Now, what about expectations? What do I mean by that?
Someone said clear articulation of expectations and consequences and rewards.
That's right. But what are those expectations? Maybe think about your expectations. What are some of your expectations in the classroom? What do I mean when I say that?
Having a classroom management system that reinforces or increases positive behaviors and decrease problem behavior.
Yes. And do you think it's important? So now those expectations, having expectations, do you think you need to have the same expectations? Do those expectations generalize across all activities of the classroom? So all of those routines and procedures, all of those things that make up our structure, our systems in the classroom, the expectations for those systems or how we do those things, right? Are they all the same?
So just a couple additional responses to your question before.
Mhm.
Someone said what you want the students to do and when.
Yes.
Class rules, learning outcomes, and instructions that are clear.
Yes. So instructions that are clear. And then the other one was what was the first one that you said, Leanne?
What you want the students to do and when.
What you want students to do and when. Okay, that's important. So when you're talking about expectations, you want to pinpoint specifically behavioral expectations for those routines and procedures. Okay, so your expectations for routines and procedures are going to be different depending on the routine and procedure, right? So your procedures for your expectations for, when the students can talk. Who can they talk to? How do they gain your attention? At what volume do they talk to you in the classroom, for example? How do they get out of their seat? And if so, when they get out of the seat, where can they go? What are the expectations for alerting the teacher if they need to use the restroom? How do they get materials? How do they sharpen their pencils? How do they line up for lunch? How do they turn in homework? All of these things, right? Lots and lots of things, right? But all of these systems, right? All of these things you have to have expectations for. The students need to know what to do. Okay. You have a different set of expectations for, independent work versus small group instruction, whole group instruction, for testing, for transitioning, lining up and going to specials or to lunch. How do the students, leave the classroom? All of these things, okay, you need expectations for. Okay.
Anika, just
So,
an interesting comment here.
Mhm.
Culture of students should be considered, since this would help direct the manner in which guidelines are formulated and expectations of both teachers and students satisfied in any given situation.
Yes, I missed that first part that you said, though.
The culture of students should be considered.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. That is an important piece. Absolutely. So again, these are all things, to build your classroom management plan that you need to consider. And I think someone mentioned it, that you also have to construct a system for reinforcing and correcting behavior. So that's another piece of the classroom management plan that you must have. And so teaching expectations and reteaching expectations. Remember in that driving example, you had lots and lots of practice, right? You know the rules of the road. And even though you may not drive, it's that rule governed behavior. You know how the system works, right? And in your class, you have to teach students how to be in your classroom. Okay. And just because they've been in school doesn't mean they know how to be in your class, in your classroom. And so you have to model those expectations. They have to practice and rehearse those expectations, rehearse that responsible behavior. Okay. You need to have them practice the behaviors that you want them to engage in. You have to simulate those consequences, those positive consequences or reinforcement for engaging in the appropriate behavior. You want to make it fun. Okay. And also correction. Okay. When the expectation is not being met. So this is all part of teaching expectations and practicing. Okay. So you have to engage in this behavior. And sometimes it's throughout the school year. 100% at the beginning of the school year and after breaks, right? Especially those long breaks if you're on holiday. Sometimes students come back and they forget those expectations. So they need a little refresher. Okay. So, how do the students know what the expectations are? Well, you're going to teach them those expectations. And you also want to know if the students, how they know, is if they can state the expectations and they know what to do when. And I think someone mentioned that, like they know um, in each activity what it is that they are supposed to be doing, how they do it, how quickly they're supposed to do it. Okay. All the different activities of the classroom. Okay. Can they tell you? How do they know? And you can also observe, you can monitor, you can see what they're doing. And if you notice, if you observe that they are not engaging in those behaviors appropriately, fluently, in a timely manner, then you might need to reteach. So, turning these expectations into habits, again, it's reinforcing and correcting misbehavior. You must have, and I believe someone said this too, that you must have a menu of how you're going to reinforce behavior, appropriate behavior, or rewards, right? Also, a key thing, and I don't know, it makes sense that you want the students involved in developing what they're going to earn, what they're going to get if they engage in the appropriate behavior. What behaviors must they engage in to earn it? So you're doing this with them, right? And they, if you do things with people, they own it. They've taken, part in developing something. So they're more inclined to follow it. How often can they earn the reward? And how do the students know they're making progress? And there's all sorts of ways to do this. There's all sorts of, classroom management strategies or behavior management strategies where students can see their progress if they're working toward a bigger goal. That reinforcement or rewards should be differentiated. So longer time to get more behavior, more appropriate behavior. So maybe they're working towards a monthly goal. So, they contact a bigger reward if they behave longer, right? And then are these rewards posted? And the same for corrections. Again, the students involved in developing it. What happens if they engage in the behavior and they know exactly what the expectations are, what's going to happen if they engage in misbehavior. And this, all of this, what I'm talking about is in the book. And we share in the book a whole guide for you for developing your menu of consequences. Okay, so if you want a little more, you can check that out there in the essence of time. And so sometimes I hear teachers say, well, I don't have time to teach expectations. Ooh, and you think, ooh, when am I going to teach these expectations? A lot of work. Yes, there is some work involved. You definitely have lots to do as teachers. I know I've been there, but I promise you, if you skip teaching expectations, it will be Rock-tober all year long. Problem behaviors will suck time, energy, and the life out of you. And I promise you, again, that learning to construct a robust classroom management plan and implement it effectively is something that you will carry with you for the rest of your career. It's an investment in your students. It's an investment in your future as a teacher and your mental health. Okay. So what I will leave you with, we've got a few minutes left here, is I talked a little bit about coping strategies, but you have to teach coping strategies. Students are dealing with a lot. You all are dealing with a lot. And classroom management isn't just all about expectations, routines, procedures. It's about understanding the basic principles of human behavior. And you can begin through your classroom management plan to teach students how their behavior impacts the environment. And once students make a link between their behavior and the impact it's having on the environment, you can teach students those coping strategies or those behaviors that serve as replacements to problem behavior. And also, as you learn and understand this human behavior and the principles of human behavior, you can start to understand your impact, your behavior on the environment. And if you think you or your students need any coping strategies, you can shoot me an email. And that brings me to the end here. So if this is compelling to you and you had fun or you want more, and you want more procedures and ideas and strategies, you can go ahead and pick up a copy of our book on Amazon. They're actually giving a 10% discount right now. And the first half is focused on teachers and bringing out the best in students. So it's for the teachers. And the second half of the book is focused on school leaders and bringing out the best in teachers as it relates to classroom and behavior management. So that's it.
Thank you so very much, Anika. I think, we just based on the number of comments we have in the chat on Facebook, you got a lot of teachers thinking about classroom management and how to approach it. And I know we have run out of time, but who knows, maybe we can have a part 2 at some point where we can get a little deeper into some of the things that you shared. But I do think that, of course, having been a teacher, classroom management is key to success, both for teachers and the students. So
Absolutely.
I want to thank you very, very much. And I would like to thank all the members of 21st Century Educators who came on to view and for being such a wonderful audience, participating, answering questions, and sharing with each other. We have comments. Thank you so much. A great help. Thank you so much, Anika. So that's from our audience to you. Thank you very, very much. It was a very thought-provoking session. And I would like to remind our 21st Century Educators that we do have a session coming up next week, Tuesday, with Jeannie Lee. So look out for that and come and participate once again. So thank you very much. And we say goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.